Well, let's talk more about that further with Gina Abercrombie-Winstanley, President of the Middle East Policy Council, previously served as the US Ambassador to Malta and worked extensively across the Middle East brief. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. How seriously do you view, then, this Israeli military operation in the West Bank, certainly the biggest some have suggested since the Second Intifada back in 2002?
Absolutely. Well, this is a clear indication that the government of Prime Minister Netanyahu is comfortable with expanding the conflict, moving substantial forces from Gaza to the West Bank, carrying out attacks by air, by ground. It is in expansion, I think, that perhaps the U.S. government did not expect. And of course, we have asked for additional information about the operation as it is being carried out.
Well, Israel is saying this is a counter-terror operation, saying there's evidence that Iran is trying to smuggle weapons and explosives into Judea and Samaria, and they will do whatever is necessary, i.e. it is about rooting out West Bank militants to prevent attacks. Do you not accept that, then?
Well, it's a bit of a challenge, keeping in mind that if they say that it's coming through from Jordan, that Israel controls that border, that security border, and has large control over the West Bank. If it is indeed a counterterrorism operation, they still have the responsibility under international law to take care of civilians. The reports that they are blocking access to hospitals is something that's going to cause concern outside of Israel, in the region, and certainly in the United States and beyond. Under international humanitarian law, regardless of your status, military or civilian, you have the right to access medical assistance.
Yes, I mean, would this have been sanctioned by the Biden administration, do you think? And does that make any difference if it was?
I think the word sanction might be an overstatement. Israel is a sovereign nation, and as we have seen in the last 11 months and beyond, they do not ask permission from the United States or anyone else when they are acting in what they believe their best interests are. We have had several disputes over the last 11 months. The president has made his unhappiness known with how the prime minister is conducting the conflict in the Gaza Strip, the treatment of Palestinians, the destruction of Gaza, and the number of casualties. If this now becomes the similar way of carrying out this conflict in the West Bank, and we have seen that there is destruction of infrastructure going on in the West Bank, that is going to cause additional stress on the relationship. President Biden. Sure, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we saw those protests, didn't we, outside the Democratic National Convention, with protesters suggesting that the US was now an enabler of civilian casualties. Will the US, despite their protestations that Israel has the right to defend itself, will the US still continue to help fund weapons used in this conflict?
The commitment of the United States to Israel is deep. And you heard the vice president say so. You've certainly heard former President Trump say so. And the president has called himself a Zionist. This is something to be looked at, but recognizing at the same time there are generational changes. The way that my generation and before looked at Israel and its place in the region is very different than what younger Americans are seeing. They would argue a more accurate picture of Israel's place and Israel's activities. So the president has put sanctions on settlers, for instance, in the West Bank, on non-governmental organizations that support their activities, and called for accountability with regard to violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. So there are shiftings there, and we have to see what a President Harris might do and what a President Trump might do. But Vice President Harris has certainly made clear that she sees the destruction and death of Palestinians and recognizes that this is not what the United States would choose to stand for.
And in terms of the West Bank, it has been part of this conflict, hasn't it? You know, some 650 Palestinians killed there, mainly through raids. Hamas, certainly, after what we've seen with the Israeli operation, calling the raids a larger plan to expand the Gaza war, blaming the escalation in US support for Israel, and calling for Palestinians in the West Bank to rise up. You know, how much complication is there now that the support for Hamas does seem to be growing in West Bank areas?
Yes, well, I think several nations, including my own, can take some responsibility, along with the Palestinian Authority, of the weakening of the Palestinian Authority as a governing entity and one that is able to provide safety and security for Palestinians. It clearly has not been able to in many instances, and this Israeli incursion shows why that is the case. However, the Palestinian Authority is the main voice for the Palestinians and will have to be reckoned with for the day after.
Fascinating to talk to you. Gina Abercrombie-Winstanley, former US Ambassador, President of the Middle East Policy Council. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Now,